Hi. Today's international financial institution which we would be discussing is World Bank. World Bank, as I've told you, is an international financial institution that provides loans and grants to the governments of low and middle income countries for the purpose of pursuing capital projects. It comprises of two institutions: the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBRD, and International Development Association, IDA. The World Bank is a component of World Bank Group. The World Bank's most recently stated goal is the reduction of poverty. What are the objectives of World Bank? Includes providing long-term capital to its member nations for economic development and reconstruction. It helps in inducing long-term capital for improving the balance of payments and thereby balancing international trade. It helps by providing guarantees against loans granted to large and small units and other projects for the member nations. It ensures that the development projects are implemented, and hence it brings a sense of transparency for a nation from wartime to peaceful economy. It promotes the capital investment for member nations by providing a guarantee for capital investment and loans. If the capital investment is not available, then it provides the guarantee, and then IBRD provides loans for promotional activities on specific conditions. What has been the functions of World Bank? It helps the war devastated countries by granting them loans for reconstruction. It provides extensive experience and financial resources of the banks, help the poor countries increase their economic growth, reduce poverty, and a better standard of living. It helps underdeveloped countries by granting development loans. It also provides loans to various governments for irrigation, agriculture, water supply, health, and education. It promotes foreign investments to other organizations by guaranteeing the loans. World Bank provides economic, monetary, and technical advice to the member countries for any of their projects. Also, it encourages the development of industries in underdeveloped countries by introducing the various economic. What is the purpose of World Bank? It wants to create an environment that is pro-investment. It also wants to improve the stability by reducing poverty. It is working towards achieving sustainable growth for the world, increasing the opportunities for jobs and business in member nations which are underdeveloped. Through investment, it plans to promote the socio-economic status of the society. It also wants to ensure that the judicial and legal systems are developed and individual rights are protected. Strengthening the government of its member nations by promoting education, combating corruption, and to ensure that there are adequate training opportunities and research facilities. It wants to provide loans with lower interest rates and interest free credits. If we go into the history of World Bank, it was created in 1944 just like IMF in the Bretton Woods Conference along with International Monetary Fund. The president of the World Bank is traditionally an American, just like International Monetary Fund. The World Bank and IMF are both based in Washington, D.C. and work closely with each other. Although many countries were represented at Bretton Woods Conference, the United States and United Kingdom were the most powerful in attendance and dominated the negotiations. The intention behind the founding of World Bank was to provide temporary loans to low-income countries that could not obtain loans commercially. The bank may also make loans and demand policy reforms from recipients. If we see in the history from 1944 to 1974, that has been the early years of the World Bank, it made a very slow start. And primarily, there were two reasons for it. One, it was underfunded, and there were leadership struggles between US executive director and the president of the organization. When the Marshall Plan went into effect in 1947, many European countries began receiving aid from other sources. Faced with that competition, the World Bank shifted its focus to non European countries. Until 1968, its loans were earmarked for the construction of infrastructure work such as seaports, highway systems, and power plants that would generate enough income to enable a borrower country to repay the loan. In 1960, the International Development Association was formed as as in opposition to United Nations funds, that is Sunfed, providing soft loans to developing countries. Before 1974, the Reconstruction and Development loans the World Bank made were relatively small. Its staff was aware of the need to instill confidence in the bank. Fiscal conservatism ruled, and loan applications had to meet strict criteria. The first country to receive a World Bank loan was France. The bank's president at that time, John McCloy, chose France over two other applicants, Poland and Chile. The loan was 250 million US dollars, half the amount requested, and came with strict conditions. France had to agree to produce a balanced budget and give priority of debt repayment to the World Bank over the governments. World Bank staff closely monitored the use of funds to ensure that the French government met the conditions. In addition, before the loan was approved, the United States Department told the French government that its members associated with the Communist Party would first have to be removed. The French government compiled and removed Communist coalition government, the so-called tripartite. Within hours, the loan to France was approved. If we see from 1974 to 1980, the bank concentrated on meeting the basic needs of people in the developing world. The size and number of loans to borrowers greatly increased as loan targets expanded from infrastructure into social services and other sectors. These changes can be attributed to Robert McNamara, who was appointed to the presidency in 1968 by Lyndon B. Johnson. McNamara implored bank treasurer Eugene Rothberg to seek out new sources of capital outside of the northern banks that had been the primary sources of funding. Rothberg used the global bond market to increase the capital available to the bank. One consequence of the period of poverty alleviation lending was the rapid rise of third world debt. From 1976 to 1980, developing world debt rose at an average annual rate of 20%. The World Bank Administrative Tribunal was established in 1980 to decide on disputes between the World Bank Group and its staff where allegation of non-observance of contracts of employment or terms of employment had not been honored. From 1980 to 1989, McNamara was succeeded by US President Jimmy Carter's nominee Alden W. Clausen in 1980. Clausen replaced many members of McNamara's staff and crafted a different mission emphasis. His 1982 decision to replace the bank's chief economist, Hollis B. Shenry, with Anne Kruger was an example of this new focus. Kruger was known for her criticism of development funding and for describing third world government as rent-seeking states. During the 1980s, the bank emphasized lending to service third world debt and structural adjustments policies designed to streamline the economies of developing nations. UNICEF reported in the late 1980s that the structural adjustment program of the World Bank had been responsible for reduced health, nutritional, and educational levels for tens of millions of children in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. 1989 till present, there has been a response to harsh criticism from many groups. The bank began including environmental groups and NGOs in its loans to mitigate the past effects of its development policies that had prompted the criticism. It also formed an implementing agency in accordance with the Montreal Protocols to stop ozone depletion damage to the Earth's atmosphere by phasing out the use of 95% of ozone depleting chemicals, with depletion damage to the Earth's atmosphere by phasing out a target date of 2015. Since then, in accordance with its so called six strategic themes, the bank has put various additional policies into effect to preserve the environment while promoting development. For example, in 1991, the bank announced that to protect against deforestation, especially in the Amazon, it would not finance any commercial logging or infrastructure projects that harm the environment. In order to promote global public goods, the World Bank tries to control communicable diseases such as malaria, delivering vaccines for several parts of the world, and joining combat forces. In 2000, the bank announced a war on AIDS, and in 2011, the bank joined the Stop Tuberculosis Partnership. Traditionally based on a tacit understanding between the United States and Europe, the president of the World Bank has been selected from candidates nominated by the United States. This is significant because the World Bank tends to lend more readily to countries that are friendly with the United States, not because of direct US influence, but because of the employees of the World Bank. In 2012, for the first time, two non-US citizens were nominated. On 23rd March 2012, US President Barack Obama announced that the United States would nominate Jim Yong Kim as the next president of the bank. Jim Yong Kim was elected on 27th April 2012 and re-elected to a second 5-year term in 2017. He announced that he would resign with effect from 1st February 2019, and he was replaced on an interim basis by now former World Bank CEO Kristalina Georgieva, then by David Malpass on 9th April 2019. Amid the global fight with the COVID pandemic in September 2020, the World Bank announced a $12 billion plan to supply low and middle income countries with a vaccine once it is approved. The plan is said to be benefiting 2 billion people. About the leadership, the president of the bank is the president of the entire World Bank Group. The president is responsible for chairing meetings of the board of directors and for overall management of the bank. Traditionally, the resident of the bank has always been a US citizen nominated by United States, the largest shareholder in the bank. The managing director of International Monetary Fund having always been a European. The nominee is subject to confirmation by the board of executive directors to serve a 5-year renewable term. While most World Bank presidents have had banking experience, some does not have it. The vice presidents of the banks are its principal managers in charge of regions, sectors, networks, and functions. There are 2 executive vice presidents, 3 senior vice presidents, and 24 vice presidents. The board of directors consists of World Bank Group president and 25 executive directors. The president is the presiding officer and ordinarily has no vote except to break a tie. The executive directors, as individuals, cannot exercise any power or commit or represent the bank unless the board specifically authorizes them to do so. With the term beginning 1st November 2010, the number of executive directors increased by 1 to 25. As per the members, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBRD, has 189 member countries, while the International Development Association has 173 members. Each member state of IBRD should also be a member of International Monetary Fund, and only members of IBRD are allowed to join other institutions within the bank. About the voting power, in 2010, the World Bank revised the voting powers to increase the voice of developing countries, notably China. The countries with most voting power are now the United States, Japan, China, Germany, United Kingdom, France, India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Italy. Under the change known as Voice Reform Phase 2, countries other than China that saw significant gains included South Korea, Turkey, Mexico, Singapore, Greece, Brazil, India, and Spain. Most developed countries' voting power was reduced, along with a few developing countries such as Nigeria. The voting powers of the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia were unchanged. The changes were brought about with the goal of making voting more universal in with regards to the standards, rule based with objective indicators, and transparent, among other things. Now, developing countries have an increased voice in the pool model, backed specially by Europe. Additionally, voting power is based on economic size, in addition to the International Development Association contribution. About the World Bank's poverty reduction strategies. For the poorest developing countries in the world, the bank's assistance plans are based on poverty reduction strategies. By combining an analysis of local groups with an analysis of countries' financial and economic situation, the World Bank develops a plan pertaining to country in question. The government then identifies the country's priorities and targets for the reduction of poverty, and the World Bank instigates its aid efforts correspondingly. 45 countries pledged 25.1 billion US dollars in aid for the world's poorest countries. Aid that goes to the World Bank, International Development Association, which distributes the loans to 80 poorer countries. Wealthier nations sometimes fund their own aid projects, including those for disease. Robert Zelig, the former president of World Bank, said when the loans were announced on 15 December 2007 that IDA money is the core funding that the poorest developing countries can rely upon. World Bank organizes the Development Marketplace Awards, a grant program that surfaces and funds development projects with potential for development impact that are scalable or replicable. The grant beneficiaries are social enterprises with projects that aim to deliver social and public services to the groups with the lowest incomes. About the global partnerships and initiatives of World Bank, the World Bank has been assigned a temporary management responsibility of the Clean Technology Fund, which focuses on making renewable energy cost competitive with coal-fired power as quickly as possible, but this may not continue after United Nations Copenhagen Climate Change Conference in December 2009 because of the bank's continued investment in coal-fired power plants. In December 2017, Kim announced the World Bank would no longer finance fossil fuel development. Together with the World Health Organization, the World Bank administers the International Health Partnership, that is IHP Plus, which is a group of partners committed to improving the health of citizens in developing countries. Partners work together to put international principles for aid effectiveness and development cooperation into practice in the health sector. IHP Plus mobilizes national governments, development agencies, civil society, and others to support a single country led national health strategy in a well coordinated way. About the climate change, a World Bank report said in 2012 that even with current mitigation commitments and pledges fully implemented, there is roughly a 20% likelihood of exceeding 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. This is despite the fact that global community has committed itself to holding warming below 2 degrees Celsius to prevent dangerous climate change. Also, a series of recent extreme events worldwide highlight the vulnerability of all the countries. No nation will be immune to the impacts of climate change. The World Bank doubled its aid for climate change adaptation from $2.3 billion in 2011 to $4.6 billion in 2012. The planet is now 0.8 degrees Celsius warmer than in pre industrial times. It says that 2 degrees Celsius warming will be reached in 20 to 30 years. In December 2017, Kim announced the World Bank would no longer finance fossil fuel development, but a 2019 international consortium of investigative journalists article found that the bank continues to finance oil and gas exploration, pipelines, and refineries. That these fossil fuels investments make up a greater share of the bank's current energy lending portfolio than renewable projects. and that the bank has yet to meaningfully shift away from fossil fuels. European Union finance ministers joined civil sector groups, including Extinction Rebellion, in November 2019 in calling for an end to the World Bank funding of fossil fuels. About the food security, global food security program that was launched in 2010, six countries alongside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have pledged $925 million for food security. Up to this date, the program has helped 8 countries promoting agriculture, research, trade in agriculture, etc. Launched Global Food Crisis Response Program, given grants to approximately 40 nations for seeds, for etc. for improving productivity. In process of increasing its yearly spending for agriculture to $6 to $8 billion from an earlier $4 billion. It runs various nutrition programs across the world, for example, vitamin A doses for children, school meals, etc. Regarding the World Bank's training wings, the Global Operations Knowledge Management Unit is there. The World Bank Institute was a global connector of knowledge, learning, and innovation for poverty reduction. It aimed to inspire change agents and prepare them with essential tools that can help achieve development results. The World Bank Institute had 4 major strategies to approach development problems: innovation for development, knowledge exchange, leadership, and coalition building with structured learning. World Bank Institute was formerly known as Economic Development Institute, established on 11th March 1955 with the support of the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations. The purpose of the institute was to provide an open place where senior officials from developing countries could discuss development policies and programs. Over the years, the Economic Development Institute grew significantly, and in 2000, the institute was renamed as World Bank Institute. Sanjay Pradhan is the past vice president of the World Bank Institute. As of 2019, the World Bank Institute functions have mostly been encapsulated by a new unit, Global Operations Knowledge Management Unit, which is now responsible for knowledge management and learning across the bank. The Global Development Learning Network is a partnership of over 120 learning centers in nearly 80 countries around the world. The Global Development Learning Network affiliates collaborate in holding events that can connect people across countries and regions for learning and dialogues on development issues. The Global Development Learning Network clients are typically the non-government organizations, government, private sector, and development agencies who find that they work better together on sub-regional, regional, or global development issues using the facilities and tools offered by the Global Development Learning Network affiliates. Clients also benefit from the ability of affiliates to help them choose and apply these tools effectively and to tap development practitioners and experts worldwide. The Global Development Learning Network affiliates facilitate around 1,000 video conference based activities a year on behalf of their clients, reaching some 90,000 people worldwide. Most of these activities bring together participants in 2 or more countries over a series of sessions. A majority of Global Development Learning Network activities are organized by small government agencies and non-government. The GDLN in East Asia and Pacific region has experienced rapid growth, and distance learning centers now operate or are in planned 20 countries, including Australia, Mongolia, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Japan, New Guinea, Papua, South Korea, Thailand, Laos, Timor Leste, Fiji, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and New Zealand. With over 180 distance learning centers, it is the largest development learning network in the Asia Pacific region. The Secretariat Office of The Global Development and Learning and Network Asia Pacific is located in the Center of Academic Resources of Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, Thailand. This GDLN Asia Pacific was launched at the GDLN's East Asia and Pacific regional meetings held in Bangkok in 2006. Its vision is to become the premier network exchanging ideas, experience, and know how across the Asia Pacific region. The committee comprises China, Australia, Thailand, the World Bank, and finally a nominee of the government of Japan. The organization is currently hosted by Bangkok Thailand University, a founding member of the GDLN Asia Pacific. The governing committee has determined that the most appropriate legal status for GDLN AP in Thailand is foundation. The World Bank is engaging a solicitor in Thailand to process all documentation in order to obtain this status. The GDLN Asia Pacific is built on the principle of shared resources among partners and engaged in a common task, and this is visible in the organizational structure that exists as the network evolves. Physical space for its headquarters is provided by the host of GDLN centers in Thailand. Technical expertise in some infrastructure is provided by the Tokyo Development Learning Center. Fiduciary services are provided by Australian National University. Until GDLN Asia Pacific is established as a legal entity in Thailand, ANU has offered to assist the governing committee by providing a means of managing the inflow and outflow of funds and of reporting on them. This admittedly results in some complexity in contracting arrangement, which needs to be worked out on a case by case basis and depends to some extent on the legal requirements of the countries involved. About the JustPal network, a justice sector peer assisted learning network was launched in April 2011 by the Poverty Reduction and Economic Management Department of the World Bank's Europe and Central Asia region. JustPal's objective is to provide an online and offline platform for justice professionals to exchange knowledge, good practices, and peer driven improvements to justice systems and thereby support countries to improve their justice sector performance, quality of justice, and service delivery to the citizens and businesses. The JustPal network includes representatives of the judiciaries, ministries of justice, prosecutors, anti corruption agencies, and other justice related entities from across the globe. It has active members from more than 50 countries. To facilitate fruitful exchange of reform experiences and sharing of applicable goods practices, JustPal has organized its activities under 5 communities of practice, that is COPs: budgeting for the justice sector, information systems for the justice sector physical infrastructure, court management and administration, and prosecution and anti-corruption agencies. Based on agreement between the United Nations and the World Bank in 1981, the development business became the official source of World Bank procurement notices, contract awards, and project approvals. In 1998, the agreement was renegotiated, and included in the agreement was a joint venture to create an online version of the publication. Today, development business is the primary publication for all major multilateral development banks, United Nations agencies, and several national governments, many of which have made the publication of their tenders and contracts in development business a mandatory requirement. The World Bank or the World Bank Group is also a sitting observer in United Nations Development Group. About the criticisms and controversies of the World Bank, it has been long criticized for non-governmental organizations such as indigenous right groups, Survival International, and academics, including Hazard, Mrs. and its former chief economist, Joseph Stiglitz. Hazard argued that the World Bank, along with the monetary system, was designed would promote world inflation and a world in which international trade is state dominated. When they were being advocated, Stiglitz argued that so-called free market reform policies that the bank advocates are often harmful to economic development if implemented badly, too quickly, because that would be a kind of a shock therapy in the wrong sequence or in weak, uncompetitive economies. Similarly, Guerrero notices that these reforms have introduced in developing countries regulatory institutions typical of the common law legal tradition because allegedly more efficient to the legal origins theory. The letter has been fiercely criticized since it does not take into account that the legal institutions transplanted during the European colonization have been reformed. This issue makes the legal origins theory inference unreliable and the World Bank reforms detrimental. One of the most common criticism of the World Bank has been the way it has governed. While the World Bank represents 188 countries, it is run by a smaller number of economically powerful countries. These countries, which also provide most of the institution's funding, choose the bank's leadership and senior management, and their interest dominates. Titus Alexander argues that the unequal voting power of Western countries and the World Bank's role in developing countries makes it similar to the South African Development Bank under apartheid and therefore a pillar of global apartheid. In the 1990s, the World Bank and the IMF forged the Washington Consensus policies that included deregulation and liberalization of markets, privatization, and downscaling of government. Though the Washington Consensus was conceived as a policy that would best promote development, it was criticized for ignoring equity, employment, and how reforms like privatization were carried out. Stiglitz argued that the Washington Consensus placed too much emphasis on GDP growth and not enough on the permanence of the growth or on whether growth contributed to better living standards. The United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations report criticized in the World Bank and other international financial institutions for focusing too much on issuing loans rather than on achieving concrete development results within a finite period of time and called on the institution to strengthen anti-corruption efforts. Coronavirus response in 2020. The World Bank has been criticized for slow response of pandemic emergency financing facility, a fund that was created to provide money to help manage pandemic outbreaks. The terms of PEF, which is financed by bonds sold to private investors, prevent any money from being released from the fund until 12 weeks after the outbreak was initially detected. The COVID 19 outbreak met all other requirements for the funding to be released on January 2020. Critics have argued that the terms of PEF are too stringent and the 12-week delay means that the funding will be much less effective than if it was released to assist governments in initially containing the outbreak. They argue that the fund prioritizes the interests of private bondholders over public health. It is hoped that as the 2030 deadline for achieving the targets of the United States nation's Sustainable Development Goal 10 aimed at reducing inequality approaches, the World Bank will be a major player in making it a reality. These are the references. Thank you for listening.